Good morning, and thank you again for inviting me to join you. As Dwight said, my name is Fumi with the Dandelion House. What Dwight didn't mention is that I'm also the tallest Japanese Catholic in the world. So, I actually had a friend who was a mathematician, and to mathematicians, everything is a word problem. And so he said, I wonder. And he figured out that the probability of a Japanese person being over 6 feet tall and Roman Catholic is something like 1 in 320 million. So, whatever else you get from today and my message, at least you've been with a rarity. After I graduated from college, I joined something called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps for a year. And it was a program that placed young adults in a community somewhere in the United States, in my case, Brooklyn, New York, where we were placed at a work site serving those on the margins of society. And the values of the program were spirituality, social justice, community, and simple living. I was so jazzed to be spending a year in this way. In Brooklyn, there were 7 of us 20-somethings, living together in community, sharing life, chores, meals, prayer, and we were just all on fire, right, for our faith in social justice. And everything went well for the first couple of months. And about October, the euphoria wore off, and the arguments began, arguments about our budget, about grocery purchases, about dishes in the sink. Suddenly, instead of striving for our gospel ideals, we were bickering over dirty clothes on the bathroom floor. Maybe you've had similar experiences where you were brought down from your lofty ideals by interpersonal dynamics and human weakness. That church committee for homeless outreach that ended up being more about some people's egos than about service. Or the progressive political organizing you participated in where you felt shut down because you didn't know the latest acronyms. Is it POC or BIPOC or PGM, right? Why is it that precisely in these spaces where we're trying to build something new, a new society, the kingdom of God, that we so often revert to old patterns of behavior? The Israelites, I think of as the OG revolutionary movement, right? Banding together against Pharaoh, building power, orchestrating a general strike, and ultimately crossing the sea into freedom. They had dreams of an egalitarian society where the widow, orphan, and immigrant were taken care of, where debts were forgiven every 7 years, and where land was redistributed every 50 years on the Jubilee. They vowed not to have kings, but to practice a form of self-government through tribal judges and local councils. That was their dream. And then old patterns set back in. Just prior to today's reading, their leader, Moses, climbs back up Mount Sinai to receive the stone tablets of the covenant. And he's absent for 40 days and 40 nights, we're told. And the people get antsy. They get worried. Has our leader abandoned us? And does that mean our God has abandoned us? And in their fear and insecurity, they return to old ways, to ways of empire. Oh, remember the Egyptians? They had powerful gods made of gold, and wasn't one of them a bull? Let's make ourselves a god of gold and be strong like the Egyptians. And so the Israelites, freshly freed from bondage, create the means of their own enslavement. Every man is to turn over their precious gold earrings and those of their wives. Taxation, just when they thought they'd escaped Pharaoh's levies. And at regulated times and places, they're to worship this golden god in ceremonies led by Aaron and his tribe. Submission to external priestly authority, just like in Egypt. Now, I've been part of a Christian liberation movement called the Catholic Worker for the last 15 years. And we do this whole reverting to old patterns thing in the Catholic Worker, too. We also have big dreams about an egalitarian society. We preach something we call personalism, upholding the inherent personal dignity of one another and caring for one another not through large programs and institutions, but through personal, human-scaled relationships. And yet, when I was leading the San Jose Catholic Worker community, housing women and children in need in our 7-bedroom home, our program so often veered away from that personalist ideal. Often we were rigid in our house rules, demanding in the goals we set. Apply to 10 jobs this week or else. And tough in our consequences. And we told ourselves we were doing this for the benefit of our guests, to help them escape poverty. We had good intentions, certainly. But looking back, I realized it was much more about my own ego than about supporting them. I was working so hard to prove to myself and others that I was a good Catholic worker. And my own image as a successful Catholic worker depended on the measurable success of the women I worked with. And so, projecting my own ego need for success onto them, I became a harsh taskmaster, demanding that they take the steps I outlined toward their own advancement. How ironic that in a movement begun for human liberation, I replicated patterns of patriarchal domination. Here I was, the man of the house, telling the women escaping domestic violence and other hardships how to live their lives and work toward independence. As we celebrate the season of creation, it's worth noting that we do this in the climate movement too. We dream of a green future. We know that overconsumption of resources and extractive practices have led to our current crisis. And yet, we insist on technological solutions to our predicament, the very mindset that got us in trouble to begin with. We somehow believe that more solar panels and efficient batteries will save us, conveniently forgetting that mining for lithium, as well as for the copper needed to connect the solar panels to our power grids, are heavy industrial processes requiring fossil fuels, the destruction of mountains, and now undersea beds, and harm to indigenous communities the world over. Haven't we done this before? And so, how do we create something truly new? A revolution of our economy and way of life such that we live alongside the rest of the web of life, not in extractive opposition to it. Jesus was a master of breaking norms and creating something new. In the Gospels, we hear story after story of him shattering old patterns to usher in a new way of being. He heals on the Sabbath, eats with unclean hands, touches the leper, speaks as equals with women, treats Samaritans and other foreigners with respect. And, as in today's gospel, he regularly eats with tax collectors and sinners. He eats with tax collectors. Tax collectors were Roman collaborators, part of the bureaucracy of imperial occupation. In a society where the majority lived impoverished lives as landless peasants, tax collectors ate their fill, owned land, and lived well, precisely at the expense of the landless majority. In fact, such landlessness was caused directly by Roman imperial taxation. So Jesus' actions of eating regularly with tax collectors would be like a Black Lives Matter leader regularly eating with white supremacists, or worse, with black members of a white supremacist group. Or a climate activist dining with ExxonMobil executives. Betrayal, treachery, unspeakable. Personally, I'm much more comfortable in groups where others think like me, where we understand our own identities as the good guys, the progressives, the reasonable, the defenders of democracy, and know who the enemy is, the oligarchy, the President of the United States, climate change denying MAGA supporters. And yet, I yearn for something new. I long for social movements that don't replicate old patterns of oppression and division. Could Jesus be onto something? In Jesus' movement, if 99 people are on board, but there is one holdout, he reaches out to the one holdout and invites them into the flock. This is no cheap grace, no welcoming everyone in regardless of their actions. This is holding out faith in the deep humanity of the ExxonMobil executive, the weapons manufacturer, the ICE agent, the billionaire hedge fund manager. Jesus didn't convert every tax collector and sinner. In the end, he failed to convert the religious authorities of his day and the governor of the occupying Roman forces. And so, he was executed. But what he did do was lean into his vision for a new world, live into it with his whole being. In the Catholic worker movement, we call that building a new society within the shell of the old. Building a new society within the shell of the old. Part of his vision was that everybody, 100 out of 100 people, would find a seat at the banquet. And so he ate with tax collectors and sinners, healed the daughter of a Roman garrison commander, and included both zealot revolutionaries and imperial collaborators in his inner circle, thereby modeling the radical inclusion of the world he dreamed of. And so the question for us today, I think, is how do we lean into our vision for a new world without replicating the harms of the old? I've continued my experiments in the Catholic worker movement and have tried to learn from my past mistakes. 3 years ago, I started a new Catholic worker community in Portland called Dandelion House, where we do our best to lean into our vision for a new society. And so we do things like host teenagers, young adults, and others in housing crisis, and invite them to live with us in our home in community, without cost, for as long as they need. We cook and serve a street meal to about 130 to 160 people each week under the Morrison Bridge in southeast Portland. And we make the feast as nutritious and delicious as we know how, with fruits and vegetables from our garden. So last Friday we had a tomato salad, all freshly picked, an apple and pear crisp, 4 big trays from our fruit trees. I can't remember the main course was Sloppy Joe's. So with fruits and vegetables from our garden, delicious family recipes passed down from my mother and her mother. We tend our garden and food forest to feed into that food program. We protest at nuclear weapons facilities. We host weekly contemplative gatherings and the monthly cosmic liturgy of the divine feminine, in which we celebrate the Eucharist using only female images and pronouns for God and centering the earth in our worship. We do things like practice low-till gardening as a way of sequestering as much carbon in the soil as possible. And we're restoring our backyard habitat, planting native shrubs, ferns, and other plants to support our various pollinators. And this is our way of living into the vision. It's a small-scale local project because we believe part of the problem is with big institutions. So, if you'd like to join us for some or all of this, please sign up for our newsletters. My colleague Claire will pass out some clipboards where you can sign up for our newsletters that we send out about 8 times a week, 8 times a month, 8 times a year. And we'll be around after the service to do that. So Claire, you can pass them out now. Yeah. We rely on the generosity of our larger community to continue our work, such as through the St. Andrew Church Foundation grant we received earlier this year. Thank you for your support. Can we break the cycle of replicating old patterns? Can we create something truly new? It remains to be seen. Gandhi called his life an experiment in truth. At Dandelion House, we are experimenting with love, and we invite you to join us. Thanks so much.